I am really excited to be back with you. I was reflecting on the fact that this is our 25th Arizona summer. Rachel and I were married in the summer of the year 2000, right at the end of May, and in the first week of June, we moved down here to Arizona, and we have survived for 25 summers, although every year it seems like it's getting a little harder to do so, but here we are. And that very first summer, we set out on a mission to find ourselves a home church. We were a young married couple. We were 22 years old. We knew we needed to find a home church. The very first church we ever tried was this one. And we showed up in mid-June up in the chapel on the front of the property up there, and our founding pastor, Tom Schrader, was teaching, and we fell in love with the church. We thought, this is where we're going to be, and it wasn't more than maybe 2 weeks later that suddenly that lead pastor guy was gone, and there was a parade of other guys that were teaching, and we were told that over the summer, it's good to hear from the other guys, and the experience was good. We really enjoyed it. It was great, but I did keep wondering, where did that other guy go? Because he's been gone for like 5 or 6 weeks. And then he came back and he did something that I had never seen done before. He told us about his summer vacation. I was like, I've never really heard anybody do that as a pastor. Can you do that as a pastor? And there were a few things that I found very winsome in it. The first one was, if we're supposed to be a family, if this is a community together, then it would be really weird if someone that is in your family came back from their summer vacation and no one ever talked about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I love that it reinforced, we have a saying that we say around here, it's out on the wall in the lobby, it says, all of life is all for Jesus. And what I saw when Tom would come back from his vacation is a belief that his faith and his connection to his responsibility to following Jesus followed him on vacation too. That was really encouraging for me. And then the last thing was, it really reinforced for me this idea that we are always and constantly learning if we're open for the lessons, even when you're taking time off. And so as I was on vacation this summer, I thought to myself, you know what? If Tom could do it, I'm going to do it too. So buckle up. You're getting what I learned on my summer vacation 2024. If you're incredulous right now, you're in good company because I was too. And hopefully I can win you over. I'm nowhere near as good as Tom. But here we go. I made a list of things that I had learned as I was kind of going along. And I had to pare it back because I learned a lot of things this summer. So I have 8 things for you that I've learned this summer on my summer vacation. And the first one maybe is obvious. Getting away with my family is a gift. There's a reality that all of us, if you work out in the marketplace, you probably have paid time off and you get a chance to take a vacation. And if your summer was really great, maybe even got a couple weeks in a row together to do it. And then you come back and maybe 1 or 2 of your friends at work ask you about it. But generally, nobody cares because you're back to do your job. And hopefully I didn't just describe you, but this is the reality. We have a unique environment in which my job, my provision for my family is provided by your generosity and your commitment to this community. And I need to say thank you because the opportunity that I've had this summer and many other summers to be able to take time off with my family is a gift that I cannot take for granted. And in particular, as our sons begin to get older, Asher's going to be a junior this year, Beck's going to be in 7th grade, heading into junior high, time is ticking by. And the chances that we have as a family to keep having summer vacations together are getting short. And we're trying to take advantage of them. But I want to give you an update as to what we did on our summer vacation. Some of you know, maybe you've heard me mention it before, but we went to a place called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. The Boundary Waters is a 1,000,000-acre wilderness on the Canadian border in northeastern Minnesota. It borders Canada, and on the Canadian side, there's another national park that butts right up to it that's another 1,000,000 acres. Just to the west of this area, connected to it, is the Voyageurs National Park, which is one of our national parks in this country, which is close to 300,000 acres. When you add up all the bits, you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 million acres of designated wilderness. It's an incredible place. On this trip, I don't know how good you are at math. I'm sure you heard northeastern Minnesota, and you're like, oh, yes, I know. In case you don't, here you go. Here's Minnesota, and right up here on the Canadian border there is the Boundary Waters. Here's a little bit closer picture of what you can see it looks like. There are entry points. Every one of those white circles with a number on it is a designated entry point where you can enter the wilderness. You have to have a permit in order to get in on the day that you've received your permit. I had to apply 6 months in advance on the day in order to get permits for this trip. And just for sake of reference, we went into this little number 37 and we paddled all the way over to number 38. That was our plan. And now I'm going to expose you to something that my family hates. In the lead up to our trip, probably every 3 days, I would pull out a big giant map. And I'd be like, come on, guys, we got to look at this. And then especially Asher and Rachel would look at each other, and I would hear them whisper, I hate when he gets the maps out. Here it is, your captive audience. There's our map. You can see here's our trip. We went in here at 37. We paddled all the way up here and all the way across out to 38. Somebody said, how long was that? And I gave a number, and I was corrected quickly by my wife. It was about 35 to 38 miles all in that we were going to do this over the course of a week. This was our summer trip. We were very excited about it. And when I say we, I mean I was very excited about this trip. But we as a family are very committed to adventure. In fact, the second thing I learned, and I'm more committed to than ever, is this idea. We adventure together to grow together. And I have to give credit where credit is due. This lesson that was reinforced to me once again this year is actually a lesson that I can attribute to my wife. My family, I don't know if I would call us adventurous when we were growing up, but Rachel is a woman who loves adventure. She loves planning special things. And I remember specifically when we first got married, she told me when I was 10 years old, I went on a water park trip outside of Denver with my grandparents, and someday when we have kids, we're doing that. I'd just gotten married. I'm like, wow, this lady is really planning ahead. We haven't even had kids. She already knows the vacations we're taking with those kids. But as the boys were growing up, she was always planning special things for them, adventures for them to go on. And it was because we believed that when we would take our family on an adventure together, we would actually grow together on that adventure. Here's a picture. Oh, that's actually coming up. This quote comes from a book that actually our founding pastor, Tom Schrader, gave me. That is one of my prized possessions. It's a book called Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, my favorite author. And here's what he says about this idea of adventure and journey. He says, once a journey is designed, equipped, and put into process, a new factor enters and takes over. A trip, a safari, an exploration is an entity. It's different from all other journeys. It has personality, it has temperament, individuality, uniqueness. A journey is like a person itself. No two are alike. And we have seen that to be true in our lives, and so when we plan these journeys, it brings out new things in our families and our relationship with each other that's really important to us. There's a picture of the family. I realized after I'd prepared this entire thing, I didn't actually have a picture of us all together, so there we are on our adventure, wearing our very cool life preservers and surviving in the wilderness. Proverbs says this, and I believe it applies in this case. The writer of the Proverbs in this case says, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. When I look in the mirror, I see what I see. I'm not always happy about it. I see how gray my beard is getting. I see how old I'm getting. I can tell myself that with that comes wisdom and maturity, but it's not until I actually am living my life do we find out whether that's true or not. I might just be old. I don't know if I'm actually getting any wiser or getting any more confident in the way that I lead, but when we go on these adventures, we find out, and I have to be honest, on this adventure, what I saw come out of the lives of my wife and my children was incredible. Because we faced some things on this trip. We faced some hardships, and yet what came out of them adjudicated them and their character in a way that I could have never predicted because it was so great. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Because the third thing that I learned on this trip is that in life and on vacations, there is a rule that I would give to you. First is hope for the sun. The second is prepare for rain. This trip came about because much like when Rachel told me about a trip she took when she was 10 years old, in the summer before we had our very first child, Asher, Rachel had just gotten pregnant. We had just been to the OB's office, and they told us we were having a boy. They had just found out. And 2 days later, I got on an airplane, and I flew with some friends to go on my very first canoe trip in the Boundary Waters. And I remember on that trip sitting along the shores of the water on a beautiful sunny day, watching the clear lake and listening to the loons in the distance. I was like, someday, this one's mine. She had the water park. This one's mine. Like, someday, I'm going to take our family on a trip like this. And when I thought about that over the course of 15, 16 years, I always had dreams of what it was going to look like. The weather was going to be beautiful. It was going to be sunny. It was going to be hot, just hot enough that you'd want to get in the water, but not so hot you were miserable. No mosquitoes. This is what we got. Yeah, the reality is I had planned for 15 or 16 years for this lovely, perfect weather trip, and then we showed up in northern Minnesota. I had been watching the forecast for weeks in advance, which just, here's a tip for you. It means nothing weeks in advance, but I was really anticipating what's this going to look like, and then I got closer and closer and closer, and we're probably 3 days out from the trip, and the forecast looks like this. Rain, 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 rain. That's what the forecast told us. And so though I'd been hoping for wonderful sunny days, what it was looking like is we were going to face a kind of dreary week-long trip. And I didn't know what to do about it because we had to go, but we were prepared. We had rain gear. We had all of our sleeping and camping gear in dry bags packed in other dry bags so that we could make sure that we would survive. And it's a good thing that we planned for that because I have a picture here that I've taken off the National Weather Service's website because they have a feature article about our trip. Not specifically, but might as well. Here's what it looks like. I don't know how good you are at reading weather maps, but here's one on the left. It's very red. And I don't know if you see this down here, but the total rain totals in the red areas are 6, 8, and 10 inches of rain. I'm just going to read this for you for your benefit. Slow-moving heavy rain and thunderstorms tracked across northeastern Minnesota in the afternoon and evening of June 18th. That's the day we had our permit to enter in. Leading to extensive damaging flash flooding that evening and the prolonged aerial and river flooding throughout the end of the week. Scattered rain had been persistent throughout the day, I know. And then widespread strong storms initiated along a slow-moving front, allowing for persistent regeneration of thunderstorms over the same area. These storms produced torrential downpours with rain rates between 1 and 5 inches per hour. Towards the end of the article, it says that this rain event was a 1 in 1,000 year rain event. And it landed directly on top of our heads on the first day. So we had arranged with an outfitter. We drove from a small town in the middle of nowhere 2.5 hours out into the wilderness to the outfitter, who loaded our stuff in a minivan and drove us another 25 minutes away to drop us off in the middle of nowhere, and we had to paddle back to the outfitter. And as we're on the ramp and we're getting ready, and I know it says it's going to rain, and we're nervous and we got to get going, this old guy wanders his way down the road to us because there was a campsite nearby, and he was awkwardly standing near us. We're the only people there. We're getting all our stuff together, and this guy is standing here, and I look at him, and he says, "So, you guys heading in today?" "Yep." "You check out the forecast at all?" I said, "Yeah, I sure did." "Looks like it's going to be a bad one today." "I know, that's why we have to get going." He was trying to scare us out of the trip before we even got started, which I really appreciated. But the reality was, unless we headed in today, we're not going. And I was like, okay, we got to get in there, we got to find a campsite, we got to buckle down, we're going to get a rainstorm. I didn't know we were going to get 7.5 inches of rain over the course of 10 hours, which is what we got. We were standing in our campsite with ankle-deep water, our tents floating in water. But because although I had hoped for rain, or hoped for the sun, I prepared for the rain. And so that evening, as we got into our tents finally, and we had all of the boys were tucked away in their tent, and Rachel and I were tucked away in our tent, and we had dry clothes, and we had dry sleeping bags. Rachel looked at me, and she said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." Because we were suddenly off the map. I had done a lot of planning, but now we were off plan. I didn't know what to do. And so I thought about Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, where he says, "And then the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and it beat on that house, and it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock." Jesus tells a parable about two men who build a home, one of them who builds it in the easy, beautiful place on the sand, and another man who builds it in a harder place on the rock, and they didn't do it because there was rain in the forecast. In fact, they built it there hoping that they would have a sunny, wonderful place, but one of them understood that life is not always easy and sunny. In fact, oftentimes rainstorms come, and oftentimes those rainstorms are even worse than you could have ever dreamed or prepared for. And the reality of life is, unless we build our foundation on what really matters, when difficult times come, when the rainstorm comes, you will be washed away. My wife and I, we got married and we were young and we didn't know anything. We had a lot of hopes and we had a lot of dreams, and then life happened. We've buried a child. We've lost things and been through difficult things in our life, but through our faith in Christ, we have been able to stand strong on a foundation that matters because we have been prepared for the rain. Rain we could have never dreamed of, but came. Which leads to the fourth thing that I learned on this trip is that we can only control what we can control. I really wish I could have shut off the rain. When Rachel looked at me and says, "What are we going to do?" she is hoping that I have some answer that's going to make this better. And the answer was, I don't have any idea what we're going to do. We got to figure this out. Hopefully the rain stops by tomorrow morning and we can sort out what we're going to do. I brought props with me this morning because I figured, why not? That sounds fun. One of the props is this little guy right here. So probably 10 years ago, Rachel and I came to an agreement because I was starting to take our boys as they were young on backpacking trips out to the wilderness. And she knew that that put us in a precarious situation. So we came to an agreement. I would buy this little Garmin device that allows me to communicate via satellite through text messages. And it has a little button here that says SOS. If things get really bad, if somebody really gets hurt, I can push that button and they will dispatch the helicopter to come rescue us. And this was with us on the trip. Now, there is a side benefit that this device also gives us in that you can pull a weather forecast off of it, but it's a very rudimentary device. In fact, I'm going to show you how it works. You say, "I need the forecast." It sends your GPS coordinates, and what comes back is an icon like this. That's what it looked like. It is a little raindrop. And I was like, okay, I've seen that one before. I know I'm in Arizona. I've seen it. That means it's going to rain. And then I've also learned that if it's going to be a thunderstorm, it will show you this one. That's how you know there's lightning coming. I'm good at this. And if it's really going to be bad, if it's going to be a big storm, if you're in big trouble, you get to see that one, which is scary. In fact, some of the guys in the room were on a trip with me in which it told me one time that I was going to get this, and we had a huge thunderstorm up on the rim. It was crazy. So that next morning we wake up, the rain is kind of parted, and I said, I got to figure out what we're going to do. And so I pull the forecast, and what pops up on my screen is this. I've never seen that. I didn't know it could do it. And I said, this is not good. And she said, what? And I said, I almost don't want to show you. Because we had just endured a once in 1,000-year rainstorm, and now what the forecast says is, don't worry, there might be even a bigger one coming. Now, we had a benefit. The next 2 days in front of us had a little sunshine on it. The third day showed this. And so I told Rachel, we don't have an option. Here's what we have to do. We can only control what we can control. And so on the next 2 days when we have sun, we're going to paddle like we've never paddled before and try to get out of this place to survive. And so we headed out. And this is the reality of life, is it not? Proverbs say this, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. I had planned for years for this trip. I had done everything you could possibly do. I'd been packing for months. My office was covered in gear. We had an outfitter set us out. But the reality is, once we were out there, what God wanted for us is what was going to happen. And we had to deal with it because we could only control what we can control. And what we cannot control is we can't get out of here unless we paddle out. I can't control the weather. And also, the only part of me on this trip that's under my control is my attitude and position towards what's going to happen next. And when I look at my family and I see what we endured, what I saw out of them is that they controlled their optimism, their hope, and their joy in a way that seems almost impossible. Beck, my 12-year-old, he might be embarrassed that I say this, but he sang his way through our entire trip. And at the beginning, it was like, man, what joy he has. I mean, to the point that I was like, okay, that's enough singing, buddy. This is hard stuff out here. But what I saw in him is that he was confident to move in joy on the path that he had been placed on, and it was so encouraging, which is good because the fifth thing that I learned on this trip is that you have to stick to the plan, especially when the plan changes. Now, the question that you might ask is, how do you stick to the plan if the plan changes? The trick on a trip like this is being clear about what the plan is. And I think this is the trick in life. If the plan is for everything to go well, if the plan is for everything to fall into place, if the plan is for it to be easy and convenient, if the plan is for it to go exactly the way you had planned, then when the plan changes, you're in trouble. Because now how do you operate? How do you move forward? When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, one of the most dominant figures, I think especially for boys at that time, was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, if you don't follow 80s boxing, how dare you? Mike Tyson was dominating the world in the heavyweight class of boxing in the 80s. He would knock guys out in like 18 seconds. They'd get in the ring, he would hit them with one punch, the guy's out, it's over. He was a legend. And 10, 12, 14-year-old boys like I was at that age, he was like the coolest guy. And what would happen before every fight is they would find out whoever the sad sack was that had to go up against him the next time, and they would say, so what's your plan to really get at Mike? And then the guy would have some elaborate plan that he would describe. Well, I've been talking with my trainer, we've been working out, we've been trying to get our speed up, I have a longer reach than him, so I'll stay out of his distance, and I'll make sure to dance around. If I could stretch this fight over more, I think I get the upper hand. And so then the reporters would go to Mike, and they'd say, Mike, he's got a plan over there, and this is what Mike said. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's absolutely true because every single one of those guys would get out there, they'd start the dance, they'd try to keep him at his distance, and then he would do that to them, and it was over. And I felt like I got hit by Mike Tyson with my family on this trip. Like, what were we going to do? How do we stick to the plan? Because we just got punched right in the mouth, and we got to figure this thing out. There's a book by John Tyson called The Intentional Father. He's a pastor out of New York. Here's what he says in that book. Imagine a farmer walking down a backcountry road and another farmer repairing a fence. His young sons were helping him. Why are you letting your sons help you? The first farmer asked. It's going to take you 5 times as long. You should just do it yourself. Oh, but you made a mistake, the second farmer said. If you think I'm repairing a fence, I'm not. I'm raising my sons. And I think one of the keys to sticking with the plan, especially when the plan changes, is being clear about what the plan actually is. The plan is not about having an easy, luxurious vacation. The plan is about growing together as a family. The plan is about supporting each other. The plan is about reminding each other about faithfulness to follow Jesus. The plan is to remind each other that God is sovereign and knows where we're going. The plan is to raise our family. And getting punched in the mouth because suddenly we got a lot of rain does not change that plan. In fact, it made us stick to it even more. And I would argue that if we had an easy, fun vacation, I might be alone in this if you ask my family, but I would say if we had an easy, fun vacation, we would have not stuck to the plan the way we did in this, because the plan was to grow our family in their endurance, in their faith, in their commitment to each other, and in the memories that we will carry into the future. And if that was the plan, man, we really stuck to the plan this time, even though the plan changed. Seth read this to you between the first 2 songs out of Hebrews 12. The writer of Hebrews writes to the church, and he says, here's what we're called to do. We are to run with perseverance the race that has been marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. He says, here's what life looks like. It's going to be hard. It's going to require perseverance and endurance. You're going to be on a path that God has laid before you, and you need to focus your eyes on Jesus, because if you do that, you can make it to the end of the race. And it was a lesson that I picked up from this trip because I did not have an opportunity. It's something that I love to do because I think you don't learn certain lessons in any other way. I love being put in a situation where I don't have the option to back out. In 2021, I had Rachel, I love backpacking, I had Rachel take me out towards the east. We went out on the 60, and just by Picket Post Mountain and the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, I had her drop my car right there. And then I got in with her, and she drove me 40 miles out into the desert and dropped me off at a trailhead. And my only option to get back was to walk on the trail back to my car. And it taught me things about myself because I didn't have an option to say I'm really tired or I really hate this or this is hard. I just had to keep going. Those are the kinds of lessons that you cannot learn in almost any other way. And in this case, we were forced into this situation. We're not getting out unless we can paddle back. And so we started paddling. Here's the sixth thing that I learned on this trip. The path isn't always easy, but making your own path is harder. There's a reality to what a trip in this part of the country looks like because it is 2.5-ish million acres and all of it is protected from any motorized transport. There are no roads, there are no boats, there are no airplanes. And so if you want to go anywhere, you get into a canoe and you grab a paddle. I told you about props. You grab a paddle like this and you paddle yourself where you're going to go until you get to the end of the lake. And then you have to find a trail. A portage trail is what they call it. Or if you're a French Canadian, you call it portage. It makes me feel fancy, so I do like to say that when I'm on the trips. So you get to the end of the lake and you're looking for a portage trail where you will carry all of your gear across the trail to the next lake, and then you will carry your canoe on your shoulders to the next lake, and then you will continue to paddle. And those portage trails are designed to make your way easy. They're marked on a map, they've been well trodden, and they're easy to follow. The problem is we had a once in a 1,000-year rainstorm, and this is what our portage trails looked like. I don't know if you can see that. But they were anywhere from ankle to knee deep in water and mud, almost the entire trail, which was fairly miserable. I asked Rachel, I said, when you think about this trip, what do you think about? And she said it was traumatic. Now that's a little, that might be overstating it a little bit, but she might have a point. Because this made it really hard. In fact, we had one spot where we had to portage our stuff a mile. So you had to carry all your stuff for a mile through this muddy trail, drop it off on the other side, then go back a mile to pick up the rest of your stuff, and then carry it another mile back in that. And if you think that was bad, I haven't even mentioned the mosquitoes yet. I don't know if you've ever spent any time in that part of the world, but imagine what the mosquitoes would be like with this much water, and it was 10 times worse than that. And the only thing harder than following the trails were in many cases, because the water had come up so high, you couldn't get to the trail, which meant we had to just figure out how to get to the trail. And so that usually meant banking the canoe into the brush, bushwhacking our way through broken trees and being attacked by mosquitoes. Because the only thing worse than following a hard path is trying to make our own. Tom used to have a statement that I know that he got from a book. I found it because I searched it, and here's what it said. Life is hard, and it's harder if you're stupid. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't actually a comment about like intellectual capacity. This is about stubbornness. Life's hard even when it's going the way that it's supposed to go. And if you are a stubborn person who says, you know what, God's plan sounds hard, I don't like where he's put me, in fact, I'm going to do my own thing, I'm going to make my own path, I'm just here to tell you you're choosing the difficult route. Where God has you today, what he's intended for you, where he's taking you, where he's had you in the past, it might not be easy, but it's a heck of a lot easier than whatever stupid idea you would have come up with. And I'm speaking personally because I know this whole plan was mine. This is probably a holier way to say it. Psalm 118 says this, it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. This is one of the tricks of this trip is that we are, I just looked out at my friend Eric right here. Eric's been to the Boundary Waters with me. He knows, preach, right? There's a reality that you have put yourself in this position, and although what is standing in front of you is difficult, we need to be confident that what God has laid in front of us is the place that we need to be going, even if it's difficult. The seventh thing that I learned on this trip is that paddling upstream is hard and sometimes scary. One of the tricks of our trip, and the thing that I was really excited about, is that we did a bulk of this trip, a bulk of the 35 to 38 miles was on a river system, upstream. Just going to let that hang there for a second. Because there was massive flooding on the river. In fact, I was a little nervous because there was rain in the forecast, and I called the outfitter before we left, and I said, hey, I'm just noticing a lot of rain in the forecast, and we're on a river. Is this a problem? And he goes, oh, not at all. So easy. In fact, usually the problem you got to deal with on these rivers is there's low water. If you get some more water, you should be happy because it's going to make your job easier. Well, he didn't plan for the once in a 1,000-year rainstorm. So the reality was water was rushing at us. We were paddling upstream, and in many cases, you would have to get out and portage around a waterfall, and then you would put your canoe in the water at the top of a raging waterfall, which is great when you're standing next to the canoe holding it, but at some point you have to get in and start going. And my family was nervous about this, and so they looked at me. And I'm telling you, you've never lived until you've had a moment like this. Your family's nervous, they're overwhelmed, they look at you as the leader of your household, and you've got one of these in your hand. And you look at them with confidence and you say, dig deep, paddle hard, we got this, let's go. And then you dig in and you start going, hoping that you're actually right. Because here's the problem. I don't know about you, but most people don't have a lot of experience with this implement. In fact, you're probably looking and go, is it broken? No, that's a bent paddle, canoe paddle. That's what they give you. And we had to rely on two things to get us through. Number one, our expertise with this implement. And number two, my planning is confidence in leader, as a leader. And I was doing my absolute best to inspire confidence in them. We got this. We got this. Just go hard, try your best. We got this. Inside, I was thinking, I sure hope we got this. I don't know if we got this, but I don't know what else to do. Let's go. And we paddled as hard as we could. It makes me think, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the Sermon on the Mount because it's the fall series that we have coming up. All I can think about is Jesus saying the gateway to life is narrow, the road is difficult, and only a few find it. The pressure of living a Christian life in our current world is that you are swimming upstream against the currents of our society and our culture, and it is scary, and sometimes it's really hard. And it's even scarier and even harder when you realize, like I did in that moment, when people are looking to you for reassurance, and if the only thing that you have to rely on is your own skill and ability and knowledge, we're in big trouble. That's what I realized as my family looks at me and I'm putting on the face of like, we got this, no big deal. Internally, I'm like, I sure hope we don't get into big trouble here. I asked Rachel, what was so traumatic about the trip? I joked that she said it was traumatic. I think it was actually traumatic for her. She said, what was so scary for me is that at any moment something could go wrong and somebody could get really hurt. You could slip and fall and hit your head and we're in trouble. One of the boys slips out of the canoe and goes down the waterfall. We're in big trouble. She couldn't control it. And I understood that because I'm the one who's standing there trying to convey some confidence while knowing I'm going to do my best, but my best probably is barely enough to get us out of this. Because the last thing that I learned is that the adventure is dangerous because of who's control. Who's in control in a trip like this? Me. I had planned it. I had gathered them around the map. I had said, here's where we're going and when we're going to do it. And what Rachel was communicating to me about what made this so traumatic and scary for her was, she didn't say it this way, but it was like, you were the one that had to get us out of this. That's really what it comes down to. I had been to this place before. I had done these kinds of adventures before, But there's a part of me that understood I am not really up for this task. There's a concept that psychologists talk about called imposter syndrome, and maybe you've heard of it, but imposter syndrome is this idea that many of us deal with, especially if you get to positions of responsibility and elevated power, and that internally there's this lack of confidence which says, I'm a phony. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have the skills or ability to pull it off. They all think I'm in charge and I don't know anything. And it's inside you and you feel this imposter. I'm an imposter. I'm masquerading as being in control. And at any moment, someone's going to find out I'm full of junk. Now, I think we all probably experience this at some level. And the world, the culture, has a way to tell you to deal with it. And here's what they say. Stop believing those lies about yourself. Stop speaking that untruth to yourself. In fact, here's what you need to do. You need to tell yourself that that's not true. You are capable. You are smart. You are a leader. You are in control. You can do this. That's terrible advice. Because here's what is trying to be told to us is that feeling of insignificance and not being able to pull it off is a lie, and you need to tell yourself the truth. And what is actually going on is the exact opposite. You are getting a sense of what is really true about who you are. You're not up for it. You don't have the skills necessary. You're not the kind of leader you would like to be. You have expectations for who you want to be as a person, and you don't even live up to your own expectations. You, in the inside part of your heart, are being given a gift of seeing who you really are, and the world says, no, ignore it, override it, tell yourself you're really great. I'm telling you, it's at that place that grace is really found. The story that the scripture tells us about humanity is that we have all fallen short of God's glory, and we are all trying to make our own way in the world, and without him, we are lost. We are imposters, living in our imposter syndrome. And there is no grace or goodness that we can receive that is more impactful than the truth that you cannot live up to the expectations. You cannot get it all done on your own. You will fail. And the good news is that's not what it all depends on. It depends on a Savior who's already accomplished the mission. This is what Isaiah 40 says about this. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the earth and has weighed the mountains and the hills on a scale? Who's able to advise the Spirit of the Lord? Who knows enough to give him advice or to teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good? Did someone teach him what is right or show him the paths of justice? Those are rhetorical questions because the answer is no one and no. Life is scary and dangerous because of who's in control. And if it's you that's in control of your life, you have every right to be scared. But if he's in control of your life, what is outside of his scope? What is outside of his ability? What is outside of his wisdom, his knowledge, and his plan for you? Nothing. Nothing. Jesus says it this way. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, and no one shall snatch them out of our hand. Jesus says, if you have put your faith in him to survive, if you have put your faith in God's plan for your life, if you have submitted yourself in humble approach to the throne of God and saying, I am throwing myself at the foot of the cross, it's his life and his death and his resurrection that will save me, then what are you worried about? Nothing. Because he's the one that gives, and no one can take what is his. And that's the reality of what we have to face. I can't look at you and say it's going to be okay and life's going to be good, but I can pick up my paddle. And I can look you in the eyes and I can say, we need to dig deep. We need to paddle hard because he's got us. Let's go. Let's pray that God would help us to be those kinds of people. God, we thank you so much. I thank you for the gift of vacations and adventure, your creation. I thank you for safety. God, I thank you for a church that is united around the idea of health and support for their pastor so that they can engage in their family this way. God, I pray that these reflections would be helpful and encouraging to our church, that it would remind us what we're being called to. God, it would remind us to stay on the path. They would remind us to stick to the plan, and our plan is to become transformed into the likeness of your Son, Jesus, and that it is often pain and hardship and suffering that leads us to him. God, help us to see who we really are, and in doing so, help us to understand how much we need him. God, we pray this in the name of Jesus we love. Amen.